Hello, my friends. Welcome to Fae Fire. Welcome back. It's been a long time since I've done a live stream, and we are here today to talk about The Winter King Season 1 on MGM Plus or Sky TV, depending on where you live. And we have gotten to episode 5 now. And episode 5 really brought things together. And so I wanted to get on here and have a live discussion with you all. I haven't done an episode review in a few weeks now, and so I apologize. And so I wanted to get caught up because this is a great show. It's something I've been waiting for years, and so let's talk about it. If you are new to the channel, hi, my name's Erin. I am Fae Fire, and this is my channel. And we talk about a lot of Arthurian things here and a lot of other things as well. But The Winter King is my favorite book series, so this show is just near and dear to my heart. And I've been enjoying it so far. So if you're here for the live, awesome. If you're here on a rewatch, well, welcome and hello. Hello, Mrs. Duncan the Tall in the chat, and anyone else in the chat, hello, and feel free to say hi and let me know how your day's going. So I made a episode review for episode 1. I made another one for episode 2, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you guys. I am not a huge fan of doing episode reviews, and I committed to doing it for The Winter King because I thought that I've read the book series many times, and I kind of figured it would be difficult for me to do much theory crafting around this show, just knowing the book so well. But they've actually done something really creative and unique with the writing. And, they're not exactly, I mean, they are following the books, the storylines. But they're doing something really unique with the writing style where they are taking a lot of these scenes that are like told to the readers of the books. So like um we hear about Arthur's time in Gaul. We hear about the death of Mordred. These things are stories that are told to Derval, technically, because Derval is the narrator of the book series. And so if you're an Arthurian fan and you haven't read the book series and you're like, why is this so centered around Derval? Well, Derval is the main narrator, and he is also one of Arthur's Knights of the Round Table, for quote, lack of a better term. That's not what we call them in the Warlord Chronicles, but you can kind of picture his men as such. Okay. And so these are stories that are told in the books in past tense, like this is something that happened. And so in the show, they're fleshing those scenes out, the when Arthur gets exiled, the death of Mordred, these kind of things that we don't actually see in the books that they're fleshing out in the show. So it's kind of a cool writing style. I do like it because it keeps things fresh, because so many people have read these books, and instead of kind of doing a word for word adaptation, they are exploring the other, possibilities in this story, which is fun. So I've done a review on episode 1, I did a review on episode 2, and then I have not done an episode 3, 4, or 5 review. So that's what we're going to kind of be discussing here today. And I feel like these episodes really are, they kind of group things together pretty well. We kind of explored the situation with Gundlius, with Nimue, and what is kind of the aftermath of that, with Owain, and his, the return of Arthur, and sort of the adjustment period that comes along with that. And Arthur just kind of getting back to Dumnonia, what he's experiencing, what he's seeing, the changes that have occurred since he was exiled 8 years prior. And then the aftermath of Avalon. And one thing, just to get the elephant out of the room, one of the major changes that is from the book to the show that I would say is kind of the biggest change is that Merlin is there. And in the books, Merlin's not there. He's actually gone. He's actually in Gaul like this whole time. So King Ban of Benwick, excuse me, in Gaul, where Arthur was. He was fighting for King Ban, and actually Merlin in the books is there the entire time. He's actually in disguise as an old man with a long white beard, and sort of that quintessential Merlin look that we sort of all envision, is how he's in disguise in Bennewick. But he comes back into the story later, but kind of the early parts of the story are all, where's Merlin? Where's Merlin? Because he is like, he's an important figure. He's the mage of court, right? Of Uther's court. So it's a little confusing. Like Arthur's, like in the books, it starts out Arthur's gone, Merlin's gone, and he's supposedly looking for the 13 treasures of Britain, which we haven't really elaborated on too much in the show. And I'm hoping that they're going to tie that into the story later. So, all right. I've gone on a little bit. Let me say hello. There's a couple people here in watching. So hello, nice to see you. Thank you, Mrs. Duncan the Tall. You are awesome. And feel free to, drop questions in the chat if you let me know how you're feeling about the show so far and what your thoughts are. So, okay, actually, I do want to talk about one thing specifically before we get into this, and it does have to do with Merlin. So we're not really getting off subject, but it has to do with Merlin and Nimue. Okay. And so in the books, they're like lovers, kind of. I think it's implied. Okay. They don't specifically say it, but the thing is that Merlin is like a older man and Nimue is a young lady. So the whole scene that they show, I believe it was in episode 3 with Nimue being rescued from the ocean, and with Nehelenia being the one that saved her life. And so Nimue's origin story is that she is from Ireland, and she was, there's a lot of Irish like travel between England or Wales and Ireland at that point in time. However, a lot of it is raiding, and I think that Nimue was on like a raiding ship or maybe just like a refugee ship that was coming from Ireland coming to Wales. Well, they had the vessel shipwrecked offshore, and Nimue was actually the only survivor. And this is actually a play on the original story of Mordred, because Mordred, in stories like La Morte d'Arthur, which is kind of your classic Arthurian legend or reference or just story, it's like his whole life, right? And so in that story, Mordred is actually Arthur's bastard child. And when he finds out about this, there's the prophecy that, your son will kill you kind of thing. And so he takes all the babies in Wales. This is Arthur, on Arthur's order. He takes all the babies in the realm that were born on like this day, which was May Day, because it's like the Winter King and the Summer King kind of dichotomy. So he gathers all the babies, he puts them on a ship, he sends the ship out to sea, and then he has the ship sunk. So all the babies die. But then Mordred doesn't die. He survives and he ends up coming back. So yeah, that's a whole other thing. But Nimue, they kind of do a play on her story with that idea, because she's the only survivor from the shipwreck vessel. She's a young lady. She washes up on the shore, and Merlin finds her and saves her. Well, in The Winter King, they include this aspect of like Merlin believing that it was Manawyddan who saved Nimue. And I think they even include that in the book as well. But here they're saying Nimue responds to him, and this is amazing because she's washed up on shore from a shipwrecked vessel. Everyone around her has died. Everything she knows in her life is gone, and she's with some stranger, and he says, "Oh, you're okay." He's trying to comfort this young girl. He's like, "Manawyddan saved you." And she pops back with, "No, it was his wife, Nehelenia. She saved me." And could you imagine like what's going through Merlin's mind when he hears that? Because like he's a vessel for the gods, he is the Merlin. And so his patron god, which is Manawyddan, because Merlin also comes from the sea in his mythology. And there's a lot of like, Irish mythology included in his, or like he came from Ireland, or he brought the stones from Ireland and all of that. Well, when you consider how Merlin has sort of manipulated the situation with Nimue, where he's like, you need to stay chaste, you can never get married, you can never have children, you have to stay pure, you have to stay a virgin, kind of thing. In the show, he's done that. And so we have to kind of consider like what Merlin thought, what his thought process was when it comes to Nimue washing up on the shore and saying, the wife of your patron god saved my life and sent me here, and you're the person that found me. So in Merlin's mind, I think he believes that his patron's wife sent him a girl that is his. He was meant to find her and save her and raise her up and teach her to be a druid or a druidess. But she's going to surpass him at a certain point too. So that's something we cannot forget, because if she's meant to be the greatest druidess in that Britain's ever known, then eventually, the student becomes the teacher, right? So I really think that Merlin has kind of manipulated the situation just a little bit when it comes to like Nimue's abilities and saying she must, remain chaste in order to maintain her connection to the gods, because I kind of think that Merlin like feels like that's she's his. That's my God sent my God's wife sent you to me. You're meant to be like my wife, if anyone else. Like you're not going to marry someone else. If you're going to get married, if you're going to, be a vessel for the gods, you're my partner. We are, working in tandem. So it is kind of an interesting dynamic between them. I don't know if you guys caught that. Let me know in the chat if you kind of picked up on that idea. But I noticed that. And then as an extension of that, we kind of see Nimue start to do the same thing to Derval, because she's encouraging him to be a warrior. She says, you're meant to be a warrior. You're going to be one. Like, I can see like your path from the gods and that kind of thing. But Derval is in love with Nimue. Like, there's no two ways about that. He loves her. He thinks she's, just the bee's knees. She's super smart. She's amazing. And she is. She's unique. She's intelligent. She saved his life also. Arthur saved him from the death pit, but Nimue healed him and looked after him. So they've grown up together and they're best friends, and it's a little bit different from in the books, but not entirely, because Derval is, he's always been very dedicated to Nimue. But I feel like in that scene where they cut the palms and they make the blood bond, which also does happen in the books, I think there is a little bit of manipulation on Nimue's part with that. Sorry. Cars. So it's an interesting thing to consider, like what's actually going on. But I think that Nimue's kind of learned some of that manipulative behavior from Merlin, and she's starting to use it to her advantage, because like I said, this student becomes the teacher eventually, and she is going to surpass him. But she does need a warrior also. She clearly, after what happened with Gondlius and that kind of thing, like if she's going to be a female, like a powerful female figure in society, she does need to have like someone defending her. And I think that she realized that it's not going to be Arthur, which is a disappointing thing, because Nimue's sort of being groomed to be the next druid of Britain, right? Because that's like Merlin's position right now. He's the Merlin. He is the druid to Uther. And if that presence is going to continue at court in Clooohneo or in like Britain in general, then Nimue would be probably the most fitting person to be that next druid figure. But if Arthur, and the thing with Merlin, he tells Arthur later, he's like, Uther turned away from the old gods. He was turning away from the old gods. He was being a coward. He turned from the old gods to the new gods. And the gods punished him by giving him a child with a disability, with a disfigured foot. I'm going to try and put this as PC as possible. And so Merlin sees that as, a bad omen. And it does kind of tie into like following the strong, right? A king has to be strong. And that's kind of where Gunlius and Gorfith are coming from, where they're like, why are we going to follow a baby, a Christian king baby? Like, that's not what we want for our country at all. And it's harsh and it's messed up, and like K wording ending the life of the baby king is not the best way to handle that. But yeah, it is an interesting dichotomy, because from, you know, the druidic or sort of the old tradition, the old gods ways and that kind of thing, like if they're following the strong, which is ultimately how Uther was chosen to be the High King, because to be clear, there wasn't like a lineage of Pendragons, you know, going back hundreds of years and this kind of thing. No, it's a pretty modern thing. And Uther was the one who united the tribes, who, I think they even said it in episode 2, he saw the red comet. And he was the one that brought the tribes of the British together. And Arthur intends to continue that because they need to be united. There were previously like tribal kings around. Obviously, we have Gorfith is the king of Powys. We have Gunlius is the king of Siluria. We have, I think Mark is the king of Clooohneo. So there's these different kings, and they need to be united. But obviously, we can see there's contention between them, which ultimately stems from, are you a Christian king, or are you faithful to the old gods kind of thing? It's interesting. Let me know what you guys think about all of this, and if I'm going way too deep, or if you guys are following me. And I agree. Where is the cheese? If Merlin's here, where's the cheese? Where's the kitten too? There was supposed to be a kitten. Okay. Tristan shows up. There better be a freaking kitten for Sarlina. So yeah. So, hi Forrest. Thank you. Welcome to the chat, and welcome to all of you guys who are here watching. I appreciate you all. And if you have questions or anything like that, drop them in the chat. So, all right. So let me gather my thoughts here. I literally did not make notes for this. I did not organize my photos. I didn't do much prep work. I just said, you know what? We got to do this. We're going to do this. Okay. So, one final thing I kind of want to wrap this up on, since we're kind of on the subject. So, as I was saying, like, Merlin believes that Mordred, you know, he sees the omens. Are these omens, you know, is his, like, because he even says to Nimue, he says, like, your anger is blind, or, you know, it's like drowning out your skills, right? When she says, I can't hear the gods anymore, something like that. He says, well, it's just your anger, you know, let it pass. And so my thought on that part too was like, well, what if Merlin, you know, he says to Arthur, like, your father turned away from the old gods and turned to the new ones, and the old gods cursed him with this, you know, disfigured child. And so, like, is Merlin's anger blinding him, you know, when he's reading the omens and that kind of thing? Is he blinded by his own anger for Uther's, you know, betrayal as he sees it, in a sense? I don't know. It's something to consider. Like, it's hard to say, and it's hard to know. And on you know, in contrast, we have Bishop Bedwin, who is pretty level-headed and pretty open-minded. You know, he's he's not putting up a bunch of, and Bishop Bedwin is cool. Like, in the books, he's a good guy. And he's well, actually, I won't tell you guys, just in case they include this later. But but he's a good guy. He's not super strict. He's pretty open-minded. He's like, yeah, I'm a Christian, but like, I get it. You know, I see there's old, you know, you guys are like, this country is for the old gods, and I'm sure he grew up like not as a Christian. I can't remember if they tell that story in the books, but Anyway, so the last thing I wanted to include with that is, Nimue, we learned she's pregnant from Gondolius because he assaulted her when they did the sack of Avalon. And this also does happen in the books, but it's one of those things that's an off page thing where she deals with it off screen. So the fact that they kind of, again, elaborated on the scene, Merlin was there, again, he was not there when all of this stuff happened. He's been gone in Gaul. So he was there to kind of help Nimue, but it's what was really interesting. So he tells her, "You're pregnant." And so as we just discussed with Mordred, he sees baby Mordred as sort of like a divine punishment from the old gods to Uther from turning away from them. Well, Nimue, on the flip side, again, this is all tying into like the importance of king's blood. And like, we're all familiar with this topic if you're like somebody who's followed my channel. And also if you're like into like thrones and just all the stories that I like. King's blood is obviously like an important element and tied to like divinity and that kind of thing. Like the kings are like a representative of the gods on earth, like pretty much in all cultures. It's sort of, if you're a king, you have a divine connection to the gods. And so as we were just discussing, like with Mordred being sort of a divine punishment because of Uther taking on the Christian faith, we can kind of look at Nimue's pregnancy in the opposite of that, because she also was impregnated by a king. And granted, it was not of her, volition. She was not keen on that, but she became pregnant. And so she's pregnant with a child who has king's blood. She herself is like a priestess and a druidess. And she's destined to be the greatest druidess in the land. So there's kind of this idea, it's almost the opposite of how Merlin views Mordred, is how he views this child that Nimue could be pregnant with. She could be carrying like this divine gift from the gods, who's almost like a divine combatant to Mordred. I don't know what you guys think about that. I think it was really interesting. Like the more I kind of thought about it, I was like, dang. And granted, it doesn't work out. She decides to end her pregnancy. And I don't blame her for that at all, because she was assaulted, and also she's traumatized by that on many levels, including the fact that she believes that because of the things that Merlin had told her, that it's severed her connection to the gods. She's no longer a pure vessel. She can no longer hear the gods, all of these things. And so it is kind of, from her perspective, of course, like she wants to take her power back. This person did something irreparably like damaging to her and her like skill and her knowledge and her ability to connect with the gods. So it is pretty tragic from her perspective, but you can kind of see like where Merlin could be coming from if that's like their mindset, where it's like this child's a punishment from the gods, but this other child who has king's blood from another, not country, but another kingdom, who is still loyal to the old gods. And there's a lot of, well, anyways, so process that. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think that's what Merlin might have had in mind when he was like, no, you need to keep the child? And in the end, they even have that conversation. I've defied the gods, when after Nimue's taken those herbs, and she's pretty sick. I don't know what exactly it's done to her body, but yeah, she's pretty sick over there by the river when Merlin finds her and kind of helps her and heals her. And they both believe that they've defied the gods by doing that. But I don't know. There's just like a lot of interesting overtones to it, a lot of like, subtext to these situations. And I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I'm kind of fascinated by it. I actually have been writing an essay about this idea. I was going to do, and I don't know how you guys feel about this. Also, let me know in the chat. How do you feel about like crossover essays / videos, because I was going to do a big project about this very subject, the king's blood, the bastard blood, that kind of thing, also in combination with A Song of Ice and Fire. So let me know if you guys, if you're interested in seeing that sort of long form video, because I have a lot of thoughts on it, including like things that tie into the Lord's right of the first night and that kind of thing, because it even kind of plays into this idea where Gondolius, he goes and he sacks Avalon and he takes it, and he's a king, he's coming from another kingdom, he comes and he's like destroys this really like sacred place and like defiles their druidess. Like, I don't know, it's making a statement. So hey Wesley, thank you. So yeah, so I've been working on that, and so hopefully I'll get that out to you guys in the next couple weeks. All right, so those are kind of my thoughts with all of that, with Merlin, with Nimue. Let's talk a little bit about Owain and what the heck he's been up to over the past couple episodes. So like after Arthur returns, you can tell Owain's a little bit like, okay, like, you know, it's a little bit of a dick swinging contest. So they like, okay, so what happens here? So Arthur comes back, he saves the baby king. And what's interesting is like Owain's not even there at Caer Cadern, because they were off, I think, like fighting off a raiding party or something like that from Powys. But anyhow, so he comes back, Arthur's there, they all kind of make nice. They're like, okay, we're gonna, you know, they decide to include Arthur in being one of Mordred's protectors, which in the books is slightly different because that was kind of agreed upon under Uther's watch, because when they name the protectors, one of the protectors is Merlin. But again, Merlin hasn't been there for like many years. He's off looking for the treasures of Britain. So like Uther names him one of the protectors, but on his behalf, Morgan and Nimue are there representing him. And Morgan, she pretends like she gets a vision or a message from the gods. And she's like, only if he shares the role of protector with Arthur. Mind you, both of them are gone, exiled, you know, wherever they're at. But Morgan makes that a stipulation. And we do see that with Morgan. Like, she's extremely, extremely loyal to Arthur, which I love to see. Oh, Mrs. Duncan the Tall says, talk about Derval. Okay, we're going to talk about Derval. So Derval, you know, okay, we're going to talk about like Derval and Owain. Okay, so Arthur gets back there. He's, you know, Arthur's like a good person, right? I mean, he's been gone for a long time. He comes back and it's like harvest time. So of course he goes out there, you know, he's not trying to like come in and like take over. So he says, you know, look, me and my men, we're going to go out, we're going to help gather the harvest. And this is something that he does do. And not just in Britain, like he does it wherever they're at. So like there's kind of a rule at this, you know, in this point in history, we might say, when harvest time comes, everyone stops. So like if you've been, because a lot of times we'll see in the summertime, this is when they're going to have raiders coming, raiding parties. So the Saxons are sending raiders. Even the Powisians are sending raiders. You know, they're coming from all over the place. They're attacking Dumnonia because it's like the capital, right? Or just sort of pecking at it, picking off what they can. And so, but at harvest time, all of that stops because everybody has to prepare the harvest to get ready for winter. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're a Saxon, if you're a Breton, if you're Irish or whoever, everybody's got to be prepared for winter because otherwise you will die. They don't have grocery stores and this kind of thing. You go, you harvest the wheat and all of that kind of stuff, and you prepare for winter. So they all do that. And Arthur's men do that in other locations. They did it when they were in Gaul. They do it, you know, wherever they're at, and they help, you know, the locals. And so, of course, that doesn't make Owain look very good because he and his men are kind of, you know, they like to drink and they're kind of rowdy and, you know, they're doing their own thing. but he's the one that's been there, sort of filling Arthur's place, is kind of what we've seen with his relationship and his dynamic with Uther. So when Arthur comes back and he's kind of one-upping him, of course, Owain's got to up his game. So he gets out there. They start, working on the harvest. Derval's out there. They're all working on the harvest. They go back and they have a feast and everything. And that was like a really lovely scene. I enjoyed it. But we can see, like, Derval even says, he's like, well, I want to, be a warrior. And he had talked to Arthur about that. But once Owain catches wind of that, he's like, hell no, this is my man, this is my dude. And so he tells Derval, it was kind of a weird scene, awkward. He was like, no, you're not going with Arthur. He got very like protective over him. And so he decides later, okay, well, I'll take him with me, because long story short, Cadwus has not been paying his taxes for like 5 years. And it's interesting, that timeline, 5 years, because Arthur was gone all that time and Uther was sort of like declining. As the others kind of say, he was becoming like a coward in a sense. Probably turning more towards the Christian God, and the rest of the kings are pretty much pagan, right? Except for Tudrik. Tudrik is a Christian god, or king, excuse me. So Owain, he gets annoyed with Arthur pretty quickly. And another thing, and I think I could be wrong about this, but I'm fairly certain that in the book, Owain was actually like skimming what Cadwus, like, I don't think Cadwus was not paying taxes. I think he was just paying very little. And I think Owain was basically like pocketing it, and Uther wasn't paying attention. Like, this was like Owain's duty. I could be wrong. I can't quite remember, but it was something along those lines. But anyway, so when they go to Cadwus's place to collect, I think that was kind of part of the incentive of Owain going and attacking the village, to go claim what they had, right? There was like, of course, some contention, and it was under like the same circumstances. They disguise themselves as the Black Shield Irish and that kind of thing, pretend they're raiders. But they take the tin. Derval, this is basically his first raid. Like, he's never done anything like this. He's still a young man. He's never really done anything crazy or other than, fighting those the Silurians in the forest that time. He's never really seen much battle. So him going and going on this raid was a little bit traumatic for him, because that wasn't what he thought that this was. He wants to be a warrior, and he sees it as sort of the white knight sort of thing. And the first time he lays eyes on Arthur's wearing his armor, and he has like impressive armor. Like, it shines like no other. It's sort of like when Percival sees the knight for the first time. It's very like angelic, because they shine, they're bright, they're white. Arthur has a big feather plume thing on his helmet, and just, it's like, they're living in times where they just don't see those kind of things very often. And so, I mean, Derval's completely like, oh my God, he's totally taken aback. And so, but yeah, so then he goes out with Owain, and this is like his experience of battle. He's like, this doesn't seem right at all. So he was pretty upset about it. But we also see, now he's got a little girlfriend, Lunette, and that's pretty faithful to the books. I don't know how I feel about how they kind of transitioned that in the show, but whatever, it's fine. So that's his girlfriend now. And she's like, listen, just go with what Owain says. Like, we got to make some money. Like, it's fine. And she doesn't really have anything to fall back on, because her father died. Avalon's destroyed. She's getting by as much as anyone else. And so, so Derval's pretty like devastated after they raid this village. He does defy Owain, because Owain's orders are pretty much like kill everyone. And I don't think he kind of was that harsh in the show. It just sort of got out of hand. But in the in the book, I think it was more brutal. And so, sorry. I've been talking a lot. So Derval is, he's pretty devastated about the whole thing. He hides that little girl. So he goes in there and he has to kill that family, but then he sees the little girl and he just can't bring himself to do it. He hides her under the blankets and that kind of thing, and he leaves her there. Well, everybody else in the village gets killed except for this little girl. So she makes her way to Clooohneo, which King Mark, is the king there. His nephew is Tristan, and Tristan takes Sarlina, the little girl, and brings her to Dumnonia to be like, what the heck? Why, obviously something's messed up. And she also saw Elane, she saw Derval and that kind of thing. So anyhow, they make, Derval and Elane, they make their way back, and you can kind of see, like, Derval, he wears his he wears his heart on his sleeve, and Arthur's pretty good at reading people, so he sees Derval, and it just was like one look at Derval, he knew something was wrong. And the same with Elane, and Elaine's not very good at hiding it, because when he left, he was really angry with Arthur, because this was when Arthur had let Gunblius go and said, oh, you're gonna go and fetch your uncle, kind of thing. And Elane was like, what? And so so when they get back, Elane, he's trying to cover for what he's been up to, so he's extra, it's like a kid, trying to cover up a lie or whatever. They're trying to be extra lay it on thick, right? And meanwhile, Derval's looking all butthurt, and it's just a little, Arthur knew something was up. So what does he do? He does the smart thing. Arthur's smart, okay? He's not an idiot. And I will say this, I knew this was going to happen. Obviously, Arthur doesn't show up and just start kicking ass, so we kind of got to wait a little bit for him to build up this idea. And it gets those last couple episodes, I was like, come on, I'm ready to see it. I want to see why Arthur's this badass. We haven't got to see him fight, we haven't got to see him kill anyone, we haven't really got to see him do anything at all until episode 5, but they had to build it up. And I think that a really great combatant for Arthur in this scene is not an enemy, but a friend, because that kind of lays the ground of what this story is. Arthur is not good or bad in the story. It's not like, oh my God, King Arthur, he's so great. Oh my God. No, he's a warlord. He's not the king. He's a bastard. He's a prince. And he's not perfect. He's very much not perfect. He makes a lot of mistakes, and those are the focal points of his presence in this story. So to have him fight Elane was, it's something really personal. It was also something, whereas we as the viewers, Elane, they did a good job of building up Elane, because I really liked his character a lot. And I liked Elaine's character more in the show than I like him in the book, because he's just not as likable. I loved this actor's, I can't remember what his name is. If somebody wants to drop it in the chat. Hey, Mandy. Hello, my darling. But he's a really great actor. He did a great portrayal of Elane, and I loved his little mannerisms. I loved his little, oh, what? His little commentary and his little crap talking. And I mean, that man is fine. Okay. Say what you want about a lot of the other, I think Elane is sexy. Okay. So, and so I enjoyed it. I really liked his performance. So leading up to, what is to come is pretty tragic. They, and they portray more of that, of Elaine's personality throughout this episode, because Arthur knows what's coming. He knows what he has to do. And it's sad for him, because him and Elane are best friends. They're cousins. They've known each other their entire lives. Elane was there when Mordred, his brother Mordred, died. So there's, and and Owain has sort of held the torch for Arthur while he was in exile. So to have to like kill him in order to reclaim that is sort of poetic, but it's also tragic, you know, it's pretty tragic. And also, yeah, it was like in those moments where Bedwin was getting in the middle of he was trying to prevent it from happening. He was like, you guys are both protectors, you know, please just stop this. And that was kind of the thing. Those three men are the protectors of Mordred. So for two of the protectors to be fighting to the death is, what kind of omen is that, you know? And Arthur seemed pretty determined, you know, to represent Tristan in that scene. He wasn't, because Owain's a fearsome fighter, and everyone knows he's the champion of Dumnonia. So that means no one's beat him. No one challenges him. When Owain goes to battle, he kicks ass and and takes names. Like, that's the thing. So Arthur did show like his prowess in this scene. But Owain, they both hated it. You could tell. And that was the thing. It was tragic because they were like, they didn't want to fight each other, but they both knew, like Owain knew he messed up. Arthur knew he messed up, and there was no two ways about it. And so the fight scene itself was epic. I loved it. They did an excellent job choreographing that. It was good. It was really, really good. It was really, really good. Like, no joke. I liked it a lot. But it was very tragic. So what do you guys think? What are your thoughts about Owain, about Derval and Arthur, and just all of that? And, you know, I will say this, that scene before the fight when Arthur goes to Derval and he's like, talks to him, that's straight out of the book. They have that conversation. Arthur's like, I'm not going to make you betray your oath, kind of thing. Sorry, the sun's coming out and I'm like so white right here. But yeah, so Arthur, you know, he doesn't force Derval to tell him, or, you know, tell exactly what happened. He's just is like, did it happen or didn't it? You know, are the gods going to be on my side or Owain's side? I think is what he says. And this, what does he say? Yeah, this scene, it's good. When they're arguing and Owain, he goes at Derval because Derval comes up and he offers Arthur his sword. And actually in the book, what's interesting about that scene is, like, you know, Arthur and Owain, they're arguing, and Owain even calls Arthur out for using his magic sword. So when Derval offers him the sword, Arthur actually asked Derval if he can use the sword, if he can use his sword, because the sword that Derval actually has, and I don't know why they didn't include this, Howl, which is Lunette's father, the guy from Avalon, he was killed during the sack. He taught Arthur and Derval how to fight with the sword. So he was actually a warrior before in his younger years. He might have fought with Uther or something like that. But he taught the boys how to fight. And so when Owain says that to Arthur, Arthur turns and he says, is that Howl sword? To Derval, and Derval says, yes, it is. And he says, can I use that for the fight instead? So he fights Owain with Howl's sword, not even with like Excalibur or anything like that. So it is like more of a fight of prowess, we might say. But I do love that line when Owain comes at Derval and he's like, you broke your oath, or he broke his oath. And in the show, because Arthur does say, he says, on my oath, he broke none. And I loved how he did that in the show. It was so good. He's like, he broke none. Like, he really like let him have it. And that was like more than I was expecting. I loved it a lot. I really liked the battle scene. It was good. It was really good. Yeah, Mrs. Duncan the Tall, like Eric and Eric. Yeah, totally. Definitely that vibe. Because even here in this photo, you can see like what's like Owain's face. He's just like, no, this is not what I wanted. I've been drinking all night. I don't want to fight Arthur. That's not what I'm here for. So thank you, Mandy. A little bit. It's washing me out slightly. I can close my blinds if I need to, but I don't want to because then it's gonna be too dark. I gotta get the sun while I can. So okay. Let's see. So hello to everyone in the chat. I'm just gonna like take a breather. I've been talking a lot. Okay. So next I do want to talk about Morgan. I love Morgan. I really do. They've changed her story quite a lot also in this show. And okay. So in the book, Morgan is like completely different. She got burned in a house fire. So in the books, Arthur has 3 sisters, okay? He has Morgan, he has Anna, and he has Morgause. And these are like historically Arthur's sisters, right? Morgause is married to the king of Orkney. Can't think of his name right now. And then Anna is married to the king of, why do I want to say Benwick? It's not Benwick. Somewhere down there in Gaul. Somewhere down Galway. Anyway, so they're married off. They live in other countries. Morgan was married to somebody, to like a knight or like a lord or something like that. But on their wedding night, their house caught fire and her husband was killed. And Morgan was horribly burned. Like her whole body is all burned and messed up. So she actually wears a gold mask at all times. And she doesn't, she's a druid. She lives at Avalon. But she's not like how she is in the show. She's disfigured and she's angry and she's not a very nice person. She's just very angry, but she's very smart. She's extremely intelligent. And that's kind of portrayed in the show also, where they're like, why don't you have a husband? And she's like, because I'm too smart. And but they are giving her this like beautiful imagery. So the fact that they're not making her like this burned figure is slightly concerning, but we'll get into that. But they are giving her the attributes of the Lady of Avalon, which she has portrayed in nearly all, Arthurian stories. Like she's the Lady of Avalon. She's a priestess of the goddess. In some stories, she's the Lady of the Lake, or like if it's a title that she carries, of the Lady of the Lake. And I think they're bringing a lot of that to this show, where it's her characteristics from the Mists of Avalon. And that's a little bit of a taboo subject because the author of the Mists of Avalon got into some hot water with things, hot water, so to speak. But we're not going to get into that because despite all of that, it was a incredible book, and it portrays Morgan in a way that she is the focal point of that. And so I'm glad to see some of those characterizations. I'm so sorry. I'm going to close my blinds. I'm so glad to see some of those characterizations coming to the show, and us getting to see that in Morgan, because, she's one of those characters that is a wild card in a lot of adaptations. You never know how they're going to portray her. And I feel like she is getting like the most beautiful portrayal that we could ask for in The Winter King. And so I really appreciate that. One moment. I'm just going to close my blinds a little. Okay, much better. Okay, so Scott light on. Anyways, okay, so um so in the first episodes, Morgan was shown as like she's the lady of Avalon. She shows up at Avalon, she gets everybody running, they're all like doing their chores and doing their things that they need to do to prep for I don't know what was the holiday, was it Beltane or something like that, but anyways, um so but as the show has progressed, and by the time we got to episode 5, one thing that I was really noticing was that she is sorry, I'm trying to figure out the perfect lighting. She isn't wearing her torque anymore. She's tying her hair back in a bun. It's like little by little each episode she's becoming less of like the Lady of Avalon portrayal and kind of stepping more into her healer, demure sort of state. And I don't want to give too much away because I don't know how they're going to I'm sure it's going to happen the way that it happened in the books. But basically in the books, she becomes a Christian and she turns away from like the pagan ways. And I think that in episode 5, we're really getting a huge reason why. And the things with Morgan have been very subtle because, like I was saying, she's been sort of a background character. She shows up at Avalon, she holds the pagan celebrations, and she keeps the pagan traditions. And I love that for her. And she's more ceremonial, I think, than Nimue in a sense. Like she's more traditional. But when Arthur shows up, we are definitely seeing a big change in her where she's transitioning and she's kind of turning away from those pagan ways. And I think that in episode 5, with Merlin having her be the person to hold the naming ceremony, be the druidic representative in that ritual or in that ceremony, he was testing her because I think he can tell that she's turning away from the old gods just as her father did. And Morgan and Uther were really close, and that's something that we saw in the show. I love that they kind of portrayed this close relationship between them because people in other spheres of Arthuriana are like, what? Morgan hates Uther. And it's like, no. They had a different relationship. And so, and in this, and also in The Winter King versus other stories where Uther is Morgan's stepfather versus in The Winter King where he is her actual father, but they are illegitimate children. And I love the line that she says to Arthur. I love it so much. She says, kings dote upon their bastard daughters, but they fear their bastard sons. And I absolutely love that line because I think it's so perfect. It describes so much. And it explains the relationship between Morgan and Uther because he did keep her close. And what's really lovely, and I don't know, I mean, again, going back to like if you've read a lot of old Arthurian things, but the Elane Kane who plays Morgan, she is, to me, in my mind, she is actually like picturesque, perfect casting for Igraine, which is Arthur's mother. And they've kind of made her characterization much different in this show as well. But oh my God, Elane Kane is like who I envision for Igraine, like perfectly. So, anyways, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so Morgan, she's kind of subtly turning away from paganism, I feel, or from like the old gods towards the new, kind of like her father. And I think Merlin is recognizing that, and that's why he wanted her to be the person to hold the ritual. Also because he wasn't gonna go anyways. He was like, I'm not partaking in that, and that sends enough of a message in and of itself. But what's interesting is, so Morgan, she holds the ritual, she does the sacrifice. And I love that whole scene because, you know, or even throughout the episode, they make several mentions, or they go out of their way to really emphasize that the man who is being sacrificed, you know, was actually treated fairly decently in his final days, so that he's um not fearful. You know, he knows his death has a purpose, because this man is going to die anyways. They say he's like a murderer and an R-wordist. And so he was gonna, they, you know, he would be killed anyways for his, you know, for his crimes. But they were able, you know, they're able to use a guilty man as a sacrifice, so long as he's like purified, treated well, understands what he's, you know, doing, that his death has a purpose. And especially in consideration of, like, you know, being a sacrifice for a king's naming ceremony is not too terrible. So I mean, if you're gonna die anyway, so right. So I don't know, let me know how you guys feel about that in the chat, in the comments. Do you think, you know, if you're gonna die anyways, would you want to be a ritual sacrifice victim? I don't know. So what's the better death? So yeah, so that happened there. So and Morgan, she holds the ritual, and I really love it. They were very spot on with some of the ritualistic aspects. Like when she takes the dagger, I can't remember her exact wording, but she says something to the effect, she says it 3 times, like this, she invokes the gods basically, and she says the thing 3 times. And in Welsh mythology, the number 3 is like very sacred. It's very important. And we'll probably see it more and more throughout the show, very subtly. But there's a what are called the Welsh triads, which are this book of rules from, I want to say like around this time, that were published. And it's basically like the druidic rules, the rules of court, the societal rules, and that kind of thing. The Welsh triads, things come in 3s. And so it's like, crap, I can't think of an example, but I'll try and find one for you guys. But yeah, so the number 3 is very sacred to them. And so we got to see Morgan use her invocation, and she's also using the number 3. And so there was a lot of like really beautiful ritualistic imagery that happened in this scene. Morgan wearing the green, which I thought was really lovely, because she's been wearing like that light blue, the Dumnonian colors, but also the colors of Avalon throughout the series, excuse me. So this is the first time we kind of see her in something completely different. She's wearing the green, which is representative of fertility. So when we see Morgan in this scene wearing the green, performing as the priestess, as the druidess of Dumnonia, she's also taking on she's reenacting a fertility rite, and as the sovereignty goddess of the land, which they very much implied that's exactly who their mother is. Arthur's and Morgan's mother. They essentially implied that their mother was the goddess Brigid. There's many ways of pronouncing her name. I go with Brigid, but Brigid, you're probably familiar with her. Saint Brigid, you might have heard of her from Ireland. She was the only like Celtic goddess that was apotheosized into like a saint, right? Or not apotheosized, that's not the right word, but like they were forced to make her into a saint because the people would not give her up, because she's too important. She's a sovereignty goddess. She represents the land. She's a fire goddess. She has a sacred flame that they keep at her temple, aka church in Kildare. And so similar to Vesta or to Hestia, where she's a hearth goddess, but she's also a smith goddess. And so this idea that she forged Excalibur as a sovereignty goddess, And she mothered these children, these divine children, upon Uther, who becomes the High King of the land, the Pendragon. This is all reimagining or reenactment of a goddess, high king, a sovereignty goddess of the land who chooses her king, her male representative, to rule over the land. So the sovereignty goddess is the land. Let's imagine that. Brige is Britain, okay? And Uther as the high king, because the Pendragon he was chosen as the high king to represent, he is the king of kings. He's essentially like an emperor of Britain, okay? And so as the high priestess, or as the sovereignty goddess, she chooses this divine man to represent, to protect the land, to protect the people, to unite the people, and to be the representative, right? So I love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I love that they sort of changed Igraine's story to encompass this idea. And then when we see Morgan, hey Jez, how you doing? Thank you. Okay, here we go. Here's some Welsh triads for you. What up, my homie? This is Jez, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm gonna say it. My friend here did costumes on the show. He did the leather work. So he also did it for a little show called Cursed, and for Willow on Disney. So anyways, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. This man is very well informed when it comes to like Welsh traditions. Like, don't even listen to me. Like, I should be having you on here. So okay. So yes, exactly, Mandy. So green is the heart and the mother, and also, yeah, like the fertility of the land. So if we look at like Morgan and Arthur as sort of your divine representations, well, their mother, like she's essentially like reenacting her own mother, which is beautiful. So I loved it. And, we also saw Nimue wearing green in this episode, or in the last couple episodes. And that has to do with her, because she was wearing like the white. And then once she was defiled, she started wearing green. And the green is also, fertility, the mother, the heart, all of that. So we'll see what she's wearing next week. And I'm interested to see what Morgan's going to be wearing next week as well, because she's been wearing the blue, but it's like gotten a less like pronounced blue, I guess you might say, as the episodes have progressed. And she's sort of almost in like a discolored, like almost a grayish blue, when she actually goes and speaks to Merlin at Avalon. And she looks so like Christianized at that point, because her hair is tied back. She's wearing this, like very gray blue, just sort of colorless clothing. She doesn't look regal the way that she usually does, where she was wearing like her cloak with the fur lining and all of that. She's really toned it down. And so when she goes to Avalon, I think that's like Merlin sees her and he's like, oh crap, she's been hanging around with Bedouin way too much, So yeah, it's interesting to see her transition, and I don't know what we can expect from her in the future episodes. I have my concerns because, all right, now I'm going to share my theory that I don't want to speak of, but I'm going to speak of it to you guys. So because in the books she was burned, like, and that's like a huge part of her like her characterization in the books, the fact that they completely like abandoned that idea is really interesting. So I've had this fear that they are going to actually bring it to the show, and that it might just be something like how they've been exposing so many of these storylines that were off page or off screen in the books, that perhaps this is going to be one of those things that they bring into the storyline. And I'm absolutely terrified for it, because I mean, it's pretty bad the way it's described in the books. Like Nimue said, she tells Dervil that she's seen Morgan without her clothes on, and her whole body is just all twisted and scarred and messed up, and she's just always angry because of it. And it's like very opposite from her personality we see now, where she's intelligent and she's put together and she's a very proper lady. But in the books, she's just like, ah, I'm angry, I'm pissed off, I'm burnt up, I don't care, and then she becomes Christian, and she meets a man. All right, she meets a man. He's a weirdo, but yeah. So anyways, so my theory that I will not speak of was actually, I had the concern, I hope I'm not speaking this into existence. I mean, it's already filmed. Jez, you might know. Don't tell me. Anyways, I had my concern that they were going to bring it to the show, Morgan's burn scene where she gets burned up, like, because they made it a focal point to say like, sorry, my brain just farted. Okay. What did they say? They made it a point to ask her why she's not married. Okay. And they've asked her like a couple times and like kind of brought it up. Why aren't you married? You're such a beautiful, intelligent, lovely lady. Like, you should be married. And she's like, nah, I'm too smart. And so, I had my concerns that they, who I actually thought they might try and marry her to is Gondlius, because he's following through with his terms. And then they also included that part where Gunley talking about his uncle not accepting Ladwis as his wife because she's not of the blood, is what they say, because she's Irish, right? And so I had my thoughts that they might actually like use Morgan as like a marriage pawn to sort of get Gunlius on their side. But then, you can't trust Gunlius. He's insane. He's done some really messed up stuff. And so he's like, so what if he's the one that burns Morgan? What if he locks her in and burns her up or something crazy like that? That's my worst fear. And also something that I've had in my mind that they might end up doing. And they have shown like a couple of creepy shots. I have one. I haven't been changing photos on this stream, so I apologize. But I have a photo of them together where she's holding the baby and he's kind of raising a glass, and anyways, it's just the two of them, and I was like, this better not be some sort of foreshadowing. I love Morgan. I have a photo. This is a picture of Morgan right here. Morgan and Sir Tristan, and then that's the witch Hellas and Sir Lancelot. Anyways, so yeah. So that's where we're at with Morgan. I think that we're going to see some changes with her in the next couple episodes, because I do think that after she performed the ritual at the naming ceremony, I think that's going to push her further away from paganism again, because she didn't seem like she enjoyed that very much. I don't know if you guys agree or not, but I think that she seems, I don't know, she just seems like she's being pushed away slowly. And after the, having to do a sacrifice, like, I don't feel like she felt confident enough to tell Merlin no when he said, you're going to do it. Like, because that would be fully admitting like she's, being influenced by like the Christian faction, right? And she talks a lot about like tradition. This is a tradition. This is the way things are, that kind of thing. Does that mean she embraces all of those old traditions, or does that mean that she just goes along with it because that's the way things are? And Arthur's coming in here and he's very much like, it's time for something new. And he's sort of against the old pagan traditions, but he's not necessarily turning towards the Christians. And that's another thing about Arthur. He's very like, he's like an atheist. He's like, I don't keep the gods because it creates too much influence over my actions sort of thing. And he's just like his own man, right? So, let's see. All right. So, yeah, so I kind of think like after that, and she even like when Morgan talks to Arthur after the fact, after they do the ritual, and he's like, you know, what did you see? And she's upset because she sees in the omens, she sees the same thing that Merlin did. And so now she has to either admit that that's what she saw, or she's got to lie and say that's not what she saw. And she's going to have to go with that despite the possible repercussions, the possible terrible repercussions, because she saw the exact same vision that Merlin saw. And I don't even think she can go and talk to Merlin about that, because I don't believe that Merlin like confided in Morgan as to what he saw in the omens. I don't think he's actually spoken it aloud to anyone. Maybe Nimue, but even in that moment in the room, he just kind of like looked at Nimue and like, yeah. So it's a dangerous situation, because now we have two people that have the ability to read omens, and they are seeing the same omen. So when we question, like, is Merlin just blinded by his anger and that kind of thing? Well, maybe not. Maybe he's not just blinded by his anger. Maybe the omens are real, but it's hard to prove that, except for that Morgan has also seen it. So, thoughts. What are your guys' thoughts about Morgan, about the omen, about baby Mordred, about Merlin in, episode 4? Like, was he gonna drop the baby off a cliff like Arthur said? I don't know. There was, and going back to that scene where Merlin goes and takes the baby, I absolutely loved that, because that was like an exact reenactment of like in La Morte d'Arthur, or sort of your classic Arthurian legend, where the story is Merlin glamored Uther to look like Igraine's husband, and he broke into the castle because Igraine was already married to another man, and so Uther, had Merlin glamour him. He goes in and he sleeps with Igraine, and then has her husband killed out on the battlefield, right? And so then after he's dead, he marries Igraine, and she has Arthur, right? He was like divinely conceived that night. But then, because it was so close in time, people suspect that like it might not be Uther's child. There's all kind of complications. So anyways, Merlin decides he's going to take Arthur and to be fostered somewhere else. And that's the case. He basically takes Arthur like straight from Igraine, like the moment he's born, which is super tragic. But that scene was a great reenactment of that, because we see Merlin go in, he makes the guards fall asleep. He goes in, he takes the child, and he just is kind of making his way out in the night. And it was a cool reenactment of that scene, because it's been retold over and over again throughout literature and throughout history, but to see it reenacted in such an interesting way, because I can't recall, but I don't think there's been any other shows or movies that have portrayed it in that way. I could be wrong. If you guys can think of any other scenes of that, let me know. But I honestly think that's like the only one that I've seen of reenacting that scene where Merlin takes baby Arthur. But in this case, it was baby Mordred. I like that a lot. But then Arthur stops him, and he's like, am I going to have to do some protecting? Like, it's an interesting dichotomy they're faced with, because Merlin's like, look, I'll take the baby, he'll be fostered somewhere, tra-la-la, and you can be the king. You're better for it. Everyone knows that you are the best man for the job, so why not just do it? Just do it. But Arthur is loyal. He made an oath, he made a promise, and ultimately, like, Mordred is his brother and Morgan's brother, and he has nobody else to protect him. And like, if you really have a heart, he's just a baby. And that's where Morgan and Arthur are coming from. That's my baby brother who doesn't have a mother or a father. They were, his mother was brutally murdered. And you think that I'm going to usurp his throne? Like, no, that's not going to happen. And so you can kind of, this is like where we see Arthur, like good decisions, bad decisions, he's loyal, he keeps his oaths. And what are oaths? Oaths and oaths, they're just words, but keeping them is the hard part. So, yeah. Oh, okay. Just as Excalibur does the Merlin scene. Interesting. I haven't watched Excalibur. I think maybe like a really, really, really long time ago, but I'm due for a rewatch. Okay. All right, let me catch up in the chat here for a minute. And if you guys have any questions, comments, anything like that, drop them in the chat if you want me to discuss anything. I think we're pretty much caught up on everything at this point, I think. If I'm forgetting anything, let me know. Let me look at my photos. That'll tell me. So we talked about Arthur's mother. Yeah, we've pretty much covered it all. I do like also there was like that moment with Morgan when she goes to Avalon and she's talking with Merlin and she's looking for Nimue. She's like, where is Nimue? Is she safe? What's going on with her? Because, there was that scene with Morgan and Nimue in episode 3 or 4, where Nimue really wants to kill Gunlius. She's like dead set on it. She's like, I'm going to kill this guy. And Morgan tells her no. She's like, listen, I can't help you with this. And it almost seems a little bit harsh from Morgan, like what she did, because it almost was a little bit cold, because Nimue was assaulted by this guy. Like, I don't blame her for wanting to kill Gunlius at all. Like, that makes perfect sense, to get revenge, not only just as a woman, but as the fact that she was the druidess of Avalon. That's a big, like, especially because Gunlius is, he keeps the old gods. He's not a Christian king. So like him going and defiling like a servant of the old gods is a pretty, I don't know, dramatic move, I guess you might say, pretty like heavy-handed. And so yeah. And so it's interesting that Morgan sort of was like, well, listen, you're going to have to do what Arthur says, like plain and simple, that he's in charge and that's that. And so we see that loyalty that Morgan has to her brother. But in the way that she was even willing to turn against essentially her sister, because Morgan and Nimue were sort of like sisters because they live, at Avalon together. They've studied together. They've trained together. And Merlin says Morgan is a druid in all but name, which I believe is different than in the books, because she is definitely a druidess in the books. So anyhow, I thought it was a little bit harsh that Morgan was like, no, I can't help you. If you're going to kill Gunlius, I can't be a part of it, kind of thing. Because she's, standing by her brother. But then when she goes to Avalon, she's very concerned about Nimue. And she's like, where is she? How is she doing? What's going on with her? I need to know if she's okay, kind of thing. And she is really worried about her. And Merlin's just like, I'll look after Nimue. Don't worry about it, kind of thing. So I don't know what we can expect going forward from those two. But you can see, and it's a little bit more defined because in the books, like those two hate each other, Morgan and Nimue. They are really like at each other's throats at all times because Morgan's older. And again, they're both druidesses, but Morgan wants to be like the Lady of Avalon, but Nimue is favored by Merlin. And, Merlin sees more potential in her. And then when it comes to the 3 wounds, which they haven't really elaborated on in the show, but there's the wound to the body, the wound to the mind, and the wound to the pride, and you have to suffer all 3 wounds in order to become a druid. Morgan's only suffered the wound to the body, but Nimue, after she's assaulted by Gondlius, she suffers the wound to the body and the wound to the pride, I think, because Gondlius actually, he also cuts her eye out in the book, so she doesn't have an eye, and Derval pays for her to get a golden eye. So Morgan wears the golden mask, Nimue has a golden eye. These girls go through it. All right. So yeah, it's a little rough. It's a rough story. It's a rough go for my druid ladies. But yeah, and then it's kind of funny because they're like, I'm a better druidess than you because I have suffered way more than you. I've been, R-worded and had my eyeball cut out versus you who's only had your whole body burned in a fire and your husband killed. Yeah. So, it's an interesting dynamic between those two. But it does ultimately contribute to like Morgan turning away from the old gods, because she's never going to be what Nimue is destined to be, kind of thing. But I do like to see them like loving each other and her being like, where's Nimue? Is she okay? Because in the books, they're just like, just at each other's throats. And Nimue really avoids Morgan. Everybody avoids Morgan. She's just like so crabby. She's so grumpy, which I don't blame her. She's had a rough time. So, okay. So I think that about, okay. Actually, one more thing. I will talk about this. And this is my own personal, like, I don't know, I guess theory or just observation. And I talked about this a little bit in my first video that I made with when it comes to Gondlius and Gorfith, okay? Their uncle and nephew. And my view on those two is that they are representing the 2 serpents of Britain, or the 2 the 2 dragons that fight. So when it comes to like the legend of Vortigern, which is a generation before Arthur and all these guys, Vortigern was the king of Powys. And we see Vortigern in the movie King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, but they don't really like follow this storyline. But basically the classic storyline, and I think this comes from the Mabinogi, is that Vortigern wanted to build this tower, and each night the tower would crumble and he couldn't figure out why. And so he has Merlin come, and Merlin says there's 2 dragons that fight underneath your tower every single night, and that's why you can't build the tower. And what the dragons represent, the red dragon of Britain and the white dragon of the Saxons. So it's like, an extension of the Saxons invading the land, because that's another huge aspect of Arthurian legend, is like the this coming of the Saxons, the sort of integration to Anglo-Saxon Britain, right? And so so the white dragon is the Saxons in this legend, and what happens is Vortigern actually makes an alliance with the Saxons so that he can fight against the Picts, who are from Scotland, the Irish coming from the west, the raiding Irish, and other Saxons coming from the east, and then like your people from Gaul coming from the south. So basically they're just constantly attacked on all sides, the Britons at this point in time, because after Rome leaves, they just kind of abandon Britain, and they're like, good luck, because the fall of Rome is happening, and they're like, well, we got to get back to that. And so a bunch of the Romans, or basically all the Roman legions, leave Britain, leave it undefended. So everybody's like, oh, that's some good land, I'm going to take that. So they all come in and they start like raiding and taking land. So Vortigern makes an alliance with some Saxons that are called Hengist and Horsa. And they fight for Vortigern and defend him from a bunch of the Picts. And Vortigern gives them land, the land of Kent. Okay. And then slowly they start to want a little bit more. They start bringing their people over. They bring over their sister, who ends up like, Vortigern's like, hey, that is one fine lady. So they're like, oh, you want her for a wife? You can have her for a wife, but you have to give us a little more land. So he takes the wife, and then, he gives them more land. So anyway, so the Britons themselves are like, Vortigern sucks. He's literally giving away our land to Saxons and like making deals with them. So he gets like, exiled or killed or something. I can't really remember how his story ends up, but they don't like him. So what I kind of see in the Winter King series, and this might be my own delusions, okay, I can't freaking guarantee this, but but I really see that they're taking Gundlius and Gorfith, and they're sort of using their storylines to kind of include this sort of overtones of the two serpents of Britain, because I think Siluria, they're no, they're the fox heads, but for some reason they gave them like a snake association in the show in like episode 1, I think. But and then with Gorfith, just being the two of them, and they're like from Powys, or Gorfith is from Powys. He's the uncle of Gundlius. So they're kind of like embodying this idea of like these two dragons of Britain that are like, fighting. They're from Powys. They're, the adversaries of Dumnonia, so it's kind of embodying that storyline and including it. And I do love, and I will say this because I have read a ton of Arthurian lore, actually, like a few years ago. Actually, when I'm like, Mandy and I were covering Cursed, I went on literally like a 2.5 year, I don't know, mecca of only reading Arthurian lore. Okay. And I read a lot of it in those 2.5 years. So what I can say is I see in this show that the people who wrote it and the people, doing the set design and this kind of thing, they brought in so many of these old stories and they're including it in. And granted, the Winter King, the Warlord Chronicles are like so good. I mean, in my opinion, they're like my favorite Arthurian legends. They're best Arthurian adaptations. They really include the history, and don't overindulge the fantasy aspect. It's more of like a scientific, logical magic, you might say. But they are still pulling from other sources in Arthuriana. So like, I see elements from the Mists of Avalon. I see elements from the Sword at Sunset. I see elements of La Morte d'Arthur. All of these infamous legends and really popular stories, they are tying them in to the Winter King, and I appreciate that so much because it's almost like an amalgamation of like the better Arthurian legends. The show isn't perfect. I'm not like, it's not perfect, but it's good. It's good. And they're really doing a great job of including the historical aspects, and bringing it into the time period and that kind of thing. And so I like it a lot. I mean, I don't know. You guys tell me how you feel. Oh, okay. This is how it goes. Vortigern gets hit by lightning in his tower and it kills him. Kind of had it coming. Yeah, very true. He did. But Vortigern's one of my favorite characters. He was played by Jude Law in King Arthur Legend of the Sword, which is a completely underrated movie. Okay, I don't care what you guys say. King Arthur Legend of the Sword is freaking epic. It's so good. Okay, like do not even say otherwise. I know, Cece, if you're still here, we love King Arthur Legend of the Sword, and it should have gotten the whole series because it was meant to be a 6-part movie series, and they only did the first one, and they're like, oh, it wasn't good enough. That's because like the rest of they didn't even get to add in the other characters. But anyways, we'll never know. So anyways, hey Moni, nice to see you. Thanks for being here, my dear. We're starting to wrap it up now, but yeah, that's kind of like, those are my thoughts over, these first half of the season. I believe there's 10 episodes in season 1. And so I'm excited to see where we're going to go from here. We're really like, now we're into the story. We've gotten past sort of the clunky like introduction of things. We've got to see Arthur fight now. The fight scene was epic. I really, really loved the fight scene. It was just so good. It was well choreographed. It was dramatic. It was emotional. It was perfect. I really loved it. I thought it was great. It wasn't cheesy. Like, there's been a couple of choreographed moments in the show where I'm like, it's not coming off right. One specific I will point out is when Derval, I want to say it was episode 2, when Derval goes up to Gunblius and he's like, I have a scar from the death pit. Do you want to see it? Kind of thing. And he reaches behind himself to grab it. I'm like, and then Nimue comes. I'm like, this is so, Gunblius would have seen all of that happening right in front of his face. Anyways. So that was kind of annoying for me. But this fight scene with Arthur and Owain was perfect. I think they did an excellent job. I think they it was just great. It was the first real battle that we get to see Arthur, participate in, and he showed his colors. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts here on the Winter King. Let me see. So if you guys have any questions, let's drop them into the chat now, and I'm going to start wrapping it up. We've been going for about an hour and a half now, so I want to get it wrapped up here. So let's see. Oh, and I will tell you, what we've got coming up. So this weekend, my lovely co-host Mandy and I, we're coming back at you this weekend. This is my warm-up stream because it's been a while, but we are going to be doing the Yellow Jackets Greek mythology stream this weekend, live stream, Greek mythology iceberg. So it's going to be really fun. I'll bring up the thing for it. But yeah, I'm super excited. We're going to be covering all the Greek mythology that's happened in Yellow Jackets. And, it's something I've made a couple of videos on, and something we've talked about like many times, on live streams. And so we're going to be getting into all of it and a bunch of the new stuff we haven't talked about, a bunch of the Greek goddesses and who their characters, their corresponding characters are, and that kind of thing. So I'm really excited. So that should be on Saturday evening. I'm still getting the time set in stone, but I should make the video, have it scheduled today or tomorrow on YouTube. So you guys can set your reminders and make sure to be there on Saturday night for that, because it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's see. And then also I am working on a video for a show on Apple TV called The Changeling. If you guys have seen that at all, it's definitely got servant vibes. If you're here as my servant friends, my Church of Lesser Saints, it's got servant. I don't know why. I just love like creepy baby shows. I didn't know that was who I am until it happened, but apparently I love creepy baby shows. And so The Changeling is right up the alley of that, genre. And so I'm working on a video, an essay for that right now. It's actually turning out to be a lot longer than I was expecting. So keep an eye out for that. I should have that hopefully out to you guys maybe Friday or Saturday if all goes according to plan. So, okay. Well, if you guys have any questions, make sure and drop them. Otherwise, we will wrap it all up. And yeah, see, Moni loves a big iceberg theory. Mandy's like, not an iceberg. I'm like, it's an iceberg. And Jackie's sleeping on top of it. So yeah. No, Mandy, you will not embarrass yourself. You know what? You need to just channel Morgan Le Fay from episode 5 of The Winter King, and everything is going to go according to plan. It is the Eleusinian Mysteries this weekend, the greater mysteries. So according to the Greek calendar. And so that's why Mandy and I are having that this weekend, because a huge aspect of what we're going to be discussing is going to be the Eleusinian mysteries and, mystery cults and that kind of thing. So if you guys have watched Yellow Jackets, definitely be there or be square. I have a ton of content on Yellow Jackets on my channel, along, with all my Winter King stuff. So anyhow, it's going to be a lot of fun. Hey, Luna, how's it going? So, okay, she's at work, but thank you for being here. Thanks for popping in. But anyways, yeah, we're just wrapping it up. Yeah, Moni, The Changeling is really good. I definitely think you'll like it because you're a Servant fan. You're from the Church of Lesser Saints. So yeah, it's really good. You'll like it a lot. It's got a lot of like folklore. I mean, the whole thing is just, that's all it is. It's not like, oh, is this a question of what fairy tale or folklore or mythology we're possibly dabbling in? No, this is like outright, like, this is a fairy tale of some kind, a dark fairy tale, as Cal says. But anyways, yeah, it's really good. So I think you'll like it. Yeah, tell Steele. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So I'm hoping they're going to include this. So Jez says, you'll love the Mithraeum up the road from here, classic mystery religion. Yes, and I do love Mithraism, Mithras in general. And I talked about that in my first video on the Winter King, because, as we've discussed a lot in this stream, it's a lot about the pagan, the old Celtic, the old Briton gods, versus the Christian influence that's coming. But what else that is included is the cult of Mithras, and this is a heavy, it's heavily included in the book. So I'm really, really hoping that they are going to be including that in the show, and it's not just going to be Christians versus, the old gods of Britain, because it's so much more than that. And because, as we were saying, like, the Romans were there for like 400 years, 500 years, 400. And when they came, they, are sending legions from all over the place, all over Rome, all over the Roman Empire. So these people would bring their gods with them. And like, the people of Britain were pretty like, okay, do your thing, and so the Romans, like, combined a lot of gods with the old gods of Britain. But they also brought their own religions, including Mithraism, which was pretty heavily practiced in Britain until Christianity took over. And then they would like build their churches over the Mithraic temples, because Mithraic temples are underground. Because Mithras was born in a cave. And so their temples are underground. They do their rituals underground. And so, yeah, so when the Christians came, they just built their churches right over top of their temples. And so you will find, like, historically, you can find a lot of old Mithraic temples in Britain that are just underground. So anyhow, or not underground, they're pretty like not there anymore, but you can find the remains of them. So anyhow, yes, Mithras and the bull. So the bull scene that we saw in episode 1 with Merlin was kind of a nod to that, although Merlin's not necessarily Mithraic. He's like very dedicated to the British gods, but Derval is the one who gets into Mithraism, and there are others as well, because it's a soldier's god, as they describe it in the book. And I think Mithraism, the way that it's described in the Winter King is not necessarily entirely accurate, because Bernard Cornwell describes it as a soldier's religion. It's a men only religion. And I think there are some elements of that are accurate. However, I think that it's in Rome and even in Persia, which is where he originally descends from, I don't think it was like men only. He was like a men only God, because he was very much a Christ-like figure. And so going back to like Jesus Christ, the Winter King, okay, the Winter King, the winter solstice, like Jesus Christ is born on winter solstice. Well, Mithras was also born on winter solstice. Well, King Arthur was also born on winter solstice, so there's a lot of this, the Christianized, Christian Jesus, and his story and that kind of thing, pulling from the older pagan elements. And so this story definitely like really explores that. And when they include Mithraism into that, that's another element we get to explore. And as you guys can tell, I have studied a lot on Mithraism or Mithras in general, because of this book specifically, but also the show called Raised by Wolves that was formerly on HBO. It's actually a featured religion in that as well. So that was a lot. Welcome to, we're no longer at the Church of Lesser Saints. Now we're at the Temple of Mithras. But yeah, so he did have a cult. He had a mystery religion and that kind of thing. And so tying it all back into what Mandy and I have this weekend going on, the Eleusinian mysteries, we're going to be exploring more and more about mystery religions and mystery cults and that kind of thing, which, yeah, that's fun stuff. So, so hopefully you guys can come there on Saturday. Let's see. Juz says the Mithras temple at Karaburg up here is right next to a sacred well to Clooohneo. Oh, cool. It would be a squeeze with a bowl inside. I know, that's what I'm always envisioning, like these poor bowls being taken into these, like, because I think even the way like they describe it, you have to kind of like hunker down, even though it's underground, you're like basically like crouching down in there. And then they're trying to bring a bowl and sacrifice him in there, and just blood, and I would assume poop, because it happens. So anyways, but yeah, just craziness. But they're really cool scenes. And I really hope they include that scene of Derval when he is initiated into the cult of Mithras, because it's an incredible scene in the books. It's very dramatic. It's haunting in a sense. Like it's just really good. So I hope that they include that in the show as well. And by the way, Arthur, he refuses. He won't join the cult of Mithras. Because he's too atheist. Like he's just like, nope, no gods here, no gods at all, except for my sword Excalibur and maybe my mom, I guess. So anyways. All right. Well, you guys, I think that's about it. And yes, Mandy, you are right. We're all over the place because we literally see connections with everything. I do. And it's hard to not be super insane. I try and like come at all of this. I tell myself I'm doing priestess work when I'm sharing these like, things about the old gods and like literature and TV shows and that kind of thing. So this is my version of priestess work, my 2023 version, if I can share the knowledge with you guys and, ultimately like the wisdom of the goddess, right? Our souls hold the wisdom of the ages, as Misty Quigley would say. So, I like to tap into that. I like to have these discussions with you guys and to just explore these stories, and have a lot of fun with it. And, I'm glad that you guys are here for the ride and always willing to listen to my craziness. Yes, he is. Arthur is a man with modern sensibilities. He does. He does. I love his story of when he's talking with Derval and he's telling him, he says, when you're building when you're building, you're supposed to turn trees upside down or something like that, because the wood doesn't rot the wood will rot if you build with a tree like upright or whatever. He's like, he says, I like that good sensible knowledge, I think is what he says. And I love that for him, because Arthur does love that kind of stuff, and they will elaborate on that. But it kind of goes back to him out there with his men and, sowing the harvest and this kind of thing. Like, they're bringing in the harvest. He is, again, with his mother being like a representative of a sovereignty goddess, or just being the sovereignty goddess, being Brige potentially, then we see why Arthur cares about the land so much, because it's his, that's his mother, that's his land, his sister reenacting being the high priestess, being a representative of the sovereignty goddess of Britain. It's like really beautiful imagery. And I just think it's lovely and incredible. So anywho, all right, you guys. Well, I'm going to wrap it up, and I will be back here to do the Greek mythology iceberg this weekend. So keep an eye out. I will post up the link or whatever, I'll just make it on YouTube here today or tomorrow, and have that ready for you guys for Saturday. And we're going to have a lot of fun. I'm glad we got to have this conversation. I was just like, I just got to go live. We just got to talk about it on a live and just, knock it out and get all the details out. So anyways, thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate you all. I'm glad you came to listen to me ramble on about all this, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.